It's all filmed in a church for that proper Christmas feeling. Christmas, a message of hope at 2 p.m. on Christmas Eve and 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Christmas Day. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner Today. It's my last day in work today. Is it yours? If you're already sat at home, thank you for finding me. Now, I don't know about you, but I wanted to go on strike today over talking about the strikes. I know it is depressing, but when it comes to your NHS, the news today is that the Health Secretary is said to be keen to speed up the process of giving the staff a pay rise early next year. If the strikers have won, what is that going to mean for everybody else? Plus, changes to the law regarding gender recognition will be held today after debates late into the night in Scotland. We'll fill you in with all you need to know about that. On my panel this morning, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Renee Houdekamp and journalist Emma Burnell. And after Morrison's sells a turkey for about 150 quid, what's the most ludicrously expensive item you've seen this year? Let me know, GBViews at gbnews.uk. That's all coming up after a look at the latest news with Rihanna.
Bev, thank you. It's 1 minute past 10. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Train passengers are being warned their Christmas getaway could be jeopardised after Network Rail workers in Scotland announced strike action. Major disruptions expected from 6 p.m. on Saturday until Tuesday morning, with more planned in the new year. Air travel's also set to be affected, with Border Force staff walking off the job tomorrow, striking every day until January the 1st, except for next Tuesday. Meanwhile, health leaders are warning of knock-on effects following this week's NHS strikes. The Telegraph says the government's now looking to fast-track a pay rise to avert fresh action. Scotland's Shadow Health Minister, Dr Sandesh Gillane, says money isn't the only issue. Patient safety also needs to be addressed.
Imagine if you guys were going to work, or your viewers were going to work, and not knowing if that day somebody was going to die because of something that you couldn't control, because there was a lack of support, because there was a lack of equipment, because there was a lack of things going on that would have meant that somebody died. It'd be terrifying.
National Highways workers in London and South East England are also striking, walking out today until Christmas Day. The public and commercial services unions acknowledge the action will likely inconvenience travellers, but it's blaming the government for making a below-inflation pay offer. Further actions planned for next week and in the new year unless a deal can be reached. The RAC says motorists are being heartlessly overcharged with record fuel prices over the Christmas break. The average price of a litre of petrol is currently at around 153 pence. That's 7p more than this time last year, while diesel's up 27 pence at 176p. The RAC says supermarkets aren't dropping forecourt prices in line with the dip in wholesale costs. Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel UK, says retailers are taking advantage of drivers.
Supermarkets buy direct from the refinery. They don't buy through the wholesaler and that sort of thing. So they're making huge profits on drivers. And that 15 to 20p equates to something like £7 to £10 per driver. Every time a driver comes into a forecourt, the retailer is wringing his hands in delight that, oh, here's another £10 worth of profit.
A controversial gender reform bill looks set to finally be passed in Scotland later today, following days of debate and protests. MSPs argued into the early hours of the morning at Holyrood as they considered over 150 amendments. The bill will reduce the time required for applicants to live as their acquired gender from 2 years to 3 months. It will also lower the minimum age to 16. The Shadow Chancellor's accused the government of losing control of the economy after revised data showed GDP fell more than first thought in the third quarter. Rachel Reeves tweeted the Tories are leaving millions of working people paying the price for their actions. That's after the Office for National Statistics said gross domestic product fell by 0.3% between July and September. Ukraine's president has told the US Congress his country is alive and kicking and will never surrender. Volodymyr Zelensky told lawmakers that military aid's an investment in democracy and not charity. President Joe Biden told Mr. Zelensky Americans will stand proudly with Ukrainian people through its war with Russia for as long as it takes. A former advisor to George W. Bush says President Zelensky travelling straight from the front line to the US is a stark reminder of what's at stake.
It was really inspiring, and it helped to kind of focus the lens on what's going on here, from seeing Zelensky the day before on the front lines in Ukraine in Bakhmut, and then flying the next day to the United States to appear before Congress.
And the Queen Consort and the Princess of Wales have been given ceremonial military roles as part of the plans for the King's first Trooping the Colour. The parade, to be held on the 17th of June next year, marks the monarch's official birthday. King Charles will ride on horseback alongside Prince William, who'll take the Colonel of the Welsh Guards title from his father. They'll be watched by Catherine, who's now Colonel of the Irish Guards, and Camilla, who replaces Prince Andrew as Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Here we've got coming up on the show. The Health Secretary is reportedly keen to speed up the process to give NHS staff a pay rise early next year. Quoting a source close to Steve Barclay, The Telegraph says that the government could now fast-track a pay increase after 48 hours of historic strikes. Could we be a step closer for a resolution by the end of play today? Well, stay tuned. A final vote on controversial gender reforms in Scotland has been delayed until this afternoon due to ongoing debates by MSPs. The bill, if you remember, we discussed it yesterday, would lower the age of deciding your gender to just 16 years old. It is very controversial. I'll be speaking to Susan Smith from For Women Scotland to hear her concerns. My panel this morning, I'm going to be joined by NHS Dr. Renee Hoenderkamp, and political commentator Emma Burnell will be with me. And as we crawl, we're not leaping, are we? We're crawling towards the end of the year. How impressed have you been so far with our parachuted in PM? On Twitter today at GB News, let me know. So far, 90% of you are not impressed by Rishi Sunak's leadership. Given that many of you are likely to be Conservative voters, that is a damning indictment. You are with GB News. Let's get started. So NHS leaders are warning that hospitals face an extremely tough festive period. A surge in patients is expected today following the ambulance strikes. It comes as a deadline for the government to open pay talks with the Royal College of Nurses approaches. The RCN says that unless discussions start today, they'll schedule more strikes for January. Well, joining us now for more on the government's response is our political reporter, Olivia Utley, who is outside the Department of Health. What are the latest headlines this morning, Olivia?
Well, the line that Steve Barclay is going for now is that the pay for this year is now set in stone and there's nothing that he can do about it. But what he is promising is that next year he would be prepared to fast-track a nurse's pay rise. And what that means is that in April, the decision is made over what pay rise and whether to give nurses a pay rise. But the payment isn't actually received until August, and then it's backdated. What Steve Barclay is saying this morning is that he would be prepared to change that process so that in April, nurses could be given whatever pay rise the government decides on the spot, essentially. That might be good news to some nurses, but what Pat Cullen and her union is demanding is that Steve Barclay reopens talks now about payment this year, not in the middle of next year or late next year. And we also haven't yet heard any figures from Steve Barclay. So although it feels as though we might be inching towards something like a resolution, there is still certainly a lot to unpick. And one extra factor is that in Scotland, nurses have now rejected an offer from Nicola Sturgeon, which was far more generous than anything that Steve Barclay has offered here. And a similar offer, which has now been rejected in Scotland, would cost England $13 billion. So it's quite hard to see how Steve Barclay is going to find a resolution which would be affordable, but would keep Pat Cullen and the union happy. So we're not much further along than we were 2 days ago or 3 days ago.
Olivia, it was always going to be interesting to see what happened with 999 calls during the ambulance strike. Have we had any figures on whether they were down yesterday, with people actually calling out ambulances for emergencies?
Yes, they were a long way down. In the West Midlands, they were down by sort of, I can't remember, I think it's 35%, very high figures down in some areas of the country. So there is a definite worry that there are people who should have been going to hospital and were staying at home because they were worried about the pressure on the ambulances, were worried that their issue wasn't troubling enough to be using up precious ambulance resources. And it's a similar problem, of course, to what we saw during lockdown, which is what ministers are very, very worried about, where people were told to stay at home and protect the NHS, and then you had people who should have been going to hospital not going to hospital, and now we're seeing the fallout from that. We're seeing the backlog. So we're seeing people who weren't treated for cancer cases, for example, a couple of years ago, just only coming through the funnel now and needing more treatment than they would have needed then. So you could have a similar sort of situation, although obviously in much smaller form over a much shorter period of time, over the next few weeks, with people who should have been collected by an ambulance yesterday, who should have gone to hospital yesterday, putting that decision off with grave consequences.
Olivia Utley there at the Ministry of Health. One of the things that occurred to me, and I don't know about you, is with these ambulance call-outs being so low, you wonder how many people would normally call an ambulance who don't really need it. That might be one of the things to come out of this. There's no doubt people call ambulances when it's not entirely necessary. They're not just a taxi if you're unwell. You know, there will be people, of course, who didn't... my suspicion is that it'll be the elderly who don't like to trouble people, who probably did need an ambulance, who didn't call them out. And then there might be other people who never needed them in the first place. And maybe that's something that we take away from this. I'm asking you on Twitter whether you're impressed by Rishi Sunak. He's been in power now for what? I think it's a massive 6 weeks. As we know, he was parachuted in. 8 weeks. I'm asking you on Twitter, on Bev Turner today, have you been impressed by Rishi Sunak's leadership after 8 weeks in charge? And as I say, so far, a lot of you are saying no. More than 87% of you at the moment saying that you are not. Andrea is saying, I can't think of one thing that he's done yet, and that makes things better for anyone. He and Hunt are making everything worse. And John is saying, just imagine a prime minister of a so-called free country that thinks that the way China is governed is the way forward. Wait, what do we have exactly? Now, so let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. OK, after the break, I'm going to move on to the breakfast bar. I'm going to speak to my panel. Joining me today is journalist and political commentator Emma Burnell and NHS doctor, Dr Renee Hoondekamp. And first thing we're going to discuss is up to 30,000 appointments and operations were cancelled due to the nursing strikes. First, though, time for your weather.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. Bit of a foggy start in places, staying fairly damp, misty and murky across the south today, whereas further north we should see some brighter skies. Low pressure is moving away from the north, hence why it'll be drier than yesterday. But further south we've got a whole host of weather fronts just gradually edging in, bringing outbreaks of rain and drizzle across a good part of England and Wales. Eastern areas starting dry, but it is, as I say, quite misty and murky, some fog around, especially on some higher routes. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but northerly winds setting in, bringing more showers across the far north of Scotland, falling as snow at times across the Northern Isles. No chance of that further south. It'll be rain and drizzle because it is really mild here, 11, 12 degrees Celsius, but it is turning colder again across northern Britain with those winds starting to pick up once more, though generally the winds, certainly for Northern England, Northern Ireland, are a lot lighter than yesterday. During this evening, I think we're not going to see a great deal of change. Those northerly winds still bringing some showers in across northern Scotland. It might turn a bit icy as temperatures fall away, but further south it stays murky, misty again, some fog in places and rain returning to the far southwest by the end of the night. Very mild here. Temperatures may stay in double figures, but colder conditions setting in further north. And that north-south split continues into Friday morning. This band of rain could be pretty heavy. A lot of people hitting the roads on Friday, so just bear that in mind. It's going to generate a lot of spray and surface water spreading from south to north, getting into northern England and Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by the end of the day. Further south, it should brighten up during Friday afternoon. Still pretty mild here as well, although it will at times be windy. And again, I've got that big contrast between north and south. Low single figures across the north, much milder conditions further south. The milder air wins out through the Christmas period for all areas, mostly looking fairly grey for Christmas, but then it could well turn colder and brighter during Christmas Day from the northwest.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Very good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. I'm joined here at the Breakfast Bar by NHS doctor Renee Hoenderkamp and journalist and political commentator Emma Burnell. You were complimenting me on my Christmas jacket, ladies.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Fabulous.
Got my red on. Like the tree, like what we've done with the place.
I love it.
All those baubles hand-painted by Nigel Farage. We're sitting in the corner. Right. 30,000 NHS appointments have been cancelled due to NHS strikes. What does this mean for you as a doctor, Renee? What do you see? How frustrating is this for your patients?
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't mean anything for me as a doctor, other than that my heart just breaks a little bit more for my patients. I'm already at the situation where when I do a referral for a patient and they say, how long will that take? I have to say every time, I have no idea, but it could be a really long time.
Then what do they do?
Then they wait.
Do any of them go, I'm just going to go and raid the savings,
Yes.
I'm going to take out a loan, I'm going to pay for a private...
Yeah. I'm very fortunate because I work in a part of London where more patients as a percentage can probably afford to do that than if I were working in other parts of London. So yes, I do have that. And I had one the other day actually, which was actually a cancer referral. So it was a 2-week wait that was going to take a month. And the patient left me a note the next day to say, can you just do me a private referral letter?
And that could that literally have been a matter of life and death for that person? If you give cancer a 4-week run?
Potentially. I mean, you'd like to think that the difference between 2 weeks and 4 weeks isn't going to make that much difference. But you never know. I mean, the thing with cancer is the earlier you catch it, the better. So that's why we have these targets, to catch it quickly.
And psychologically?
Yes.
Like mentally, emotionally. You know, if that was my mum and she had a diagnosis like that, Emma, I wouldn't be waiting around. I'd just throw the kitchen sink at it. You'd go, right, get in the car. We're going to get you there. We're going to do something. We're getting very much a two-tier system now, aren't we?
I mean, that is the problem. The system is a mess. It's broken. I think those working in it will say that. Those who are working in it and striking will say that. Those who are working in it and not striking will say that. I don't think there's anyone who has an experience of the NHS, much as we are grateful for it. And I think it's really important to separate that gratitude from a sense that it can be improved. And I think it's from left or right, we will have a Barney over how that improvement works, where that needs to go, how that needs to happen. But I don't think there's anybody who can look at the NHS as it is now, as it was before the strikes, as it will be after the strikes, without saying something has to be done.
I also just can't help but thinking about Peter Hitchens. Some of the writing that he did during COVID was brilliant. You may not agree, Emma. And he was talking about the fact that there will be a day of reckoning. It's when you lock down the economy, when you make the NHS, we are here. This is the day of reckoning. This is what, anybody that was cheering on. I'm not blaming the nurses for that, by the way. No. But I'm blaming those decision-making processes that blocked up all of the system, and that's what we're now dealing with.
Did we not just see it yesterday as well? During COVID, we said to people, don't come to hospital. So people with heart attacks didn't come to hospital. Yesterday, we said, don't call an ambulance unless it's serious. And nobody was calling an ambulance yesterday. But people were still having heart attacks and strokes yesterday, I guarantee it.
Will there also been a few liggers that would normally call an ambulance to, go in with a thumb they've hit with a hammer?
Of course. Yes, no, absolutely.
OK, talking about the NHS, because I think we talk about it in the abstract, but do you know what? The Daily Mail have done a brilliant pie chart today to show those of us who get instant number blindness where all the money is going. So £150 billion a year is what we spend on the NHS. This is really useful. What have we got? No, I haven't got the key, I'm afraid. So diversity officers, here we go. This is the one, Renee, that diversity officers, £40 million a year for 800 people who will encourage what? Don't say diversity.
The NHS, which is, you only have to look at it, the most diverse employer in the world, to be more diverse. It's crazy. And actually, just this year alone, there have been 16 vacancies advertised. They're going to cost £700,000, which would buy an extra 6 GPs, an extra 19 nurses, or an extra 20 paramedics. We do not need this woke nonsense, I'm sorry, Emma, this woke nonsense in the NHS, because we are diverse. We are diverse.
Surely the NHS has got to be the most diverse. It's the biggest employer in the world. It's certainly diverse. There was a time, arguably, possibly, Emma, when we needed it. We don't need them now.
I would just like to say, if you pull that pie chart back up, the sliver that was 900 million and 40 million is a tiny, tiny percentage of that. Now, I can argue, and we can all argue, about the need or the unneed for these diversity officers. But what really worries me, when we start talking about NHS reform and then spend all of that time talking about the woke diversity officers, we are missing the mountain and talking about the anthill.
We're not.
And that is a real problem, because if we just want to make this a Barney about left and right, woke and not woke, we will miss the much bigger things that need to be done.
Well, no, I actually think, Emma, that this is actually part of what the gaslighting that's going on in society now, where every time we raise something that's a waste, let me give you another one, £74 million spent on paracetamol prescriptions every year, 74 million.
On
twice
paracetamol?
As much, on paracetamol that costs 37 pence in Boots or a supermarket. I think it's gaslighting to say, oh, it's a drop in the ocean, it's a drop in the ocean. It is, but when you add it all together, it isn't, and the waste is massive.
But if we only talk about the bits that we find ideologically uncomfortable, and there'll be some stuff in the NHS that the left won't like, there'll be some stuff in the NHS that the right won't like. If we purely go at this from an ideological rather than a pragmatic, practical, solutions-based perspective, we will not get it done. And that's true from the right, that's true from the left. We need to make sure that we're actually looking at how the NHS can and should work for the next 100 years.
You see, I would say it's not ideological, it's pragmatic to say we don't need to spend that amount of money on diversity. That surely is pragmatic.
What I'm saying is, if you make that the front of your argument, all you're going to do is immediately say this is about woke versus unwoke, rather than works and doesn't work.
How about 220 million on energy prices that could have been negotiated to half of that?
Well, absolutely. You'll get no argument from me on that.
I'm looking at the pie chart. I've got the key on my phone here. So the 60.6 billion is on NHS provider staff costs, understandably. There we go. The 15.9 billion non-NHS healthcare. What does that mean? Don't know. We don't know. The one that is also a little bit worrying, procurement, 24.4 billion. So that presumably is getting the stuff that we need.
Yes.
But not that's different to the amount that they would spend on drugs. So prescribing is the 8 billion.
It is. And what we need to break down here is obviously where all these different things are. So anyone who wants to defend NHS procurement will tell you that it's actually now been sent out to one company that buys it across the country. Firstly, that's not true. It doesn't. There are still hospitals buying their own stuff within the hospital, different glove suppliers, floor to floor. I've been there, I've done it, I know.
Oh, I bet.
But secondly to that, we are the biggest company in Europe. We should be able to say to 10 glove manufacturers, right, who wants this contract? Give me your best price, and actually you're going to give me a signing-on fee as well. Whenever NHS goes in front of any invoice, it triples or even more. It's like wedding.
It's awful. It's the NHS tax.
Ironically, I'm sure that there is a lot of argument about, oh, why do we need all these people as procurement officers? Well, because they will have the skills to negotiate those numbers down.
They're not doing very well, are they?
No, well, that's the thing. And this is what I'm saying. We need to invest in actually better management. Not necessarily more levels of management, but better management, people with the skills.
Want to put my hand up to do it, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I know. Listen, I know loads of people who'd be brilliant at that job, but just
Mate, I did 4 years of telesales. There's nothing I can't negotiate.
Clinical
my divorce
negligence,
settlement.
like £2 billion on clinical negligence, and particularly in obstetric care. Give every woman a midwife that she knows. That would fall through the floor.
And what's interesting about that is it's gone up 81% in the last 7 years.
Oh, it's awful. Right, OK, 2 other people who are slightly awful, Harry and Meghan. Now, I know we've talked about them a lot. Emma Burnell put her head in her hands and said, do I have to talk about Meghan and Harry? The reason we're talking about it is because this Netflix series has been the biggest hit in the history of Netflix. Why, Renee?
So I think, the PR from Netflix on it was absolutely beautiful and done so well. Excuse me. I also think that it's the royal family of the UK. It's known all over the world. People want to see them at war. It makes good TV. It's dramatic. So I think people wanted to see. It's like a new soap opera, isn't it? It's like EastEnders, but real.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, this is the interesting comparison. You say it's like EastEnders, but real, because The Crown, which was their other big win, the first series, episode 1 of The Crown, the new series of The Crown, was watched by 2.8 million people. The new first episode of Hagan and Merry, Hagan and Merry, that's the Christmas version, Harry and Meghan was seen by 4.5 million people in the first week after. Now, that's because of idiots like me talking about it, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sending everybody towards it.
I've literally not watched a second of it when it hasn't been a clip that I've been in this building watching. I'm not interested in any royal, Harry, Meghan, any of the... I don't care. But it is in some ways, it's like the Osbournes, essentially. Yeah. It's exactly the same kind of thing. Drip feed a real-life soap opera to people and they'll love it. And, 20 years ago, this is exactly what we were talking about. We were talking about the Osbournes. Yeah. Now we've got the Windsors.
And the Kardashians.
What do they do now, though? So Hollywood Bible Variety magazine is calling them a one-trick pony. I have to say, I thought, they've got a point. We've got the story in the docuseries. We've got Harry's book Spare coming out any minute now. And then what Renee?
What about the Reconciliation series?
Oh, no. Don't. I can't bear it. You mean they're going to sit up, they're going to do the Sandringham, like a second part 2 where he sits down with William? I mean, it's never going to happen.
And everyone holds hands and says sorry and sings Kumbaya.
What they want to do is make money. That's what came out of this series.
They've made a lot.
Watched it. They've made a lot, but that is clearly a big driver for them, isn't it? Did you not get that takeout when they sat there by Tyler Perry's pool and Harry said, we could have all this?
Yeah, I know.
So cringe.
It was. Lots of it was cringe. I mean, lots of it was cringe, and we know that, and we won't rehash the cringe of it. So, lots of it was cringe. I did, however, soften Bev, and I've been quite harsh on them. You know what? I thought that 1.4 million death threats to Meghan on Twitter.
Oh, come on.
Outrageous.
Oh, come on. Look, you cannot be in the public eye and not get that stuff. You just
we ought to be able to, though, surely.
No.
I mean, that's something that I having been through a Twitter storm or two myself, it's so scary.
Oh, it's not scary. You know what you do, Emma? You just don't read it, or you ignore it. You don't read it, ignore it.
I mean,
ignore it.
I am now better, but the first time it happens, it genuinely
makes you feel
very, very
Did you get bullied
badly.
at school?
a bit occasionally.
I did a bit. And at school, I remember my mum very clearly saying to me, why do you care about what these people think of you?
Because you have to spend 8 hours a day with them.
Yeah, but I thickened her skin. And I think if you, maybe she's just a bit, you know, Meghan's just totally unrealistic about the fact that people aren't always going to be nice to her. You know, every time you're on the telly a lot, people will go on and say mean things about you.
They do. I mean, apparently I'm not even a doctor. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
That's a Twitter theme.
Are you a witch doctor, are you? I've always had my suspicions. But what do you do about it? How do you handle it?
So now I do ignore it, but I have to say I agree with Emma. When it first started happening, it used to make me feel sick. And it was a very very good friend of mine who said to me, look, if you went on and said that you loved daffodils, someone would scream at you, what's wrong with roses?
Oh.
So just ignore it, walk away.
I mean, now my filters are high. I don't name search, so I don't see the majority of it. Every now and again, after I've been on the television on here, I will get clips. I know that having defended the woke this morning, I will get tweets coming at me, and that will be under the bit that you clip.
But you just...
But I can ignore that now.
Yeah.
Because, you know...
You have to.
You have to.
You
But
have to.
when it first happened, everybody going through that first time, it is really, really
But she was a blooming actress on the telly in a big series in America.
I think there's a great deal of difference between being the third tier person on Suits and being the princess of the UK.
But more, like, it's even more so. You have to have a thicker skin. Like, I will go on the inbox when I'm on the telly like this. There'll be one saying my clothes are too sexy. There's another one saying my clothes aren't sexy enough. There's one saying I don't know what I'm talking about, and there's one saying she knows too much.
Yeah,
like, you cannot keep all the people happy all of the time.
No, and eventually you do have to decide that you just be who you are, and that's very much what what I'm doing, what I come here to do.
Yes.
You know, I'm aware that often on these programmes my voice is a challenging one, one that viewers don't always agree with. But that's good, because that's what we're all for.
Absolutely.
I think you have to tell yourself you're not a bad person.
No, absolutely. And that's the hardest part.
Value the opinions of the people you value. That's it. And if you don't know these people, they don't know you. You can have that for free, Meghan. You don't have to go to the royal family for your mental health support. Right, after the break, a final vote on controversial gender reforms in Scotland. It's been delayed until this afternoon due to the ongoing debate by MSPs. The bill would shorten the time people need to live as their new gender from 2 years to just 3 months if it passes. That's all after your morning's news with Rihanna.
Bev, thank you. It's coming up to 10:33. Your top stories in the GB newsroom. Train passengers are being warned their Christmas getaway could be jeopardised after Network Rail workers in Scotland announced strike action. Major disruptions expected from 6 p.m. on Saturday until Tuesday morning, with more planned in the new year. Air travel's also set to be affected, with Border Force staff walking off the job tomorrow, striking every day until January the 1st, except for next Tuesday. Meanwhile, health leaders are warning of knock-on effects following this week's NHS strikes. The Telegraph says the government's now looking to fast-track a pay rise to avert fresh action. Scotland's Shadow Health Minister, Dr Sandesh Culhane, says that money isn't the only issue. Patient safety also needs to be addressed.
Imagine if you guys were going to work, or your viewers were going to work, and not knowing if that day somebody was going to die because of something that you couldn't control, because there was a lack of support, because there was a lack of equipment, because there was a lack of things going on that would have meant that somebody died. It'd be terrifying.
National Highways workers in London and South East England are also striking, walking out today until Christmas Day. The public and commercial services unions acknowledge the action will likely inconvenience travellers, but it's blaming the government for making a below-inflation pay offer. Further actions planned for next week and in the new year unless a deal can be reached. A controversial gender reform bill looks set to finally be passed in Scotland later, following days of debate and protests. MSPs argued into the early hours of the morning at Holyrood as they considered over 150 amendments. The bill will reduce the time legally needed for applicants to live as their acquired gender from 2 years to 3 months. It'll also lower the minimum age to 16. And Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has told the US his country is alive and kicking and will never surrender. Addressing Congress, he said military aid's an investment in democracy and not charity. President Joe Biden told Mr. Zelensky Americans will stand proudly with the Ukrainian people through its war with Russia for as long as it takes. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2105 and €1.1364 euros. The price of gold is £1,501.57 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,524 points.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, it's 10:39. This is Bev Turner Today on GB News. Thank you for joining me. So the gender reform bill looks set to finally be passed in Scotland this afternoon, following days of debate and protests. MSPs argued into the early hours of this morning at Holyrood as they considered their over 150 amendments. So let's find out what this bill will mean for people in Scotland. Susan Smith is the co-director of For Women Scotland. Good morning, Susan. Thank you for joining me. So just clarify, if you would, for our viewers and our listeners, at the moment it is legal to change your gender in Scotland. How will this bill change that?
At the moment, it's quite a lengthy process, and you require a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. What this bill is about is just removing all safeguards and all barriers to getting a GRC. You just have to swear that you're genuine. You make a solemn declaration, apparently, which is, according to ministers with staggering naivety, they think that people who want to take advantage of this new system, because the system is open to anybody and everybody, they think that people will not take advantage of it and that they will never lie about whether or not they really feel like a man or a woman. And it's frankly a nonsense. And we've seen in other countries where this has happened, how women have been attacked in places where they should be safe.
I think at the moment, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's about 30 or 40 individuals every year who apply for a gender recognition certificate. And the estimates are that that will probably increase tenfold to about 300 or 400 people. Do you understand why, when it's affecting such small numbers of individuals, Nicola Sturgeon and her government are so keen to push this through and so keen to do it so quickly?
Do you know, the scenes in Holyrood the last 2 days have been absolutely astonishing. This is not emergency legislation, and we have a lot of the same issues happening in our health service and on our railways and in our ambulance service that people in England have. And instead of prioritising those really serious issues, she has pushed this through days before Christmas. It's not emergency legislation, but Holyrood has never sat this late. And, on the night before last, the lights went out because they automatically went out at 12 o'clock. And so it's been absolutely extraordinary to watch. Holyrood claimed when they were set up they were going to do things differently, they were going to be family friendly, they weren't going to have late night debates, and all that has been jettisoned for a piece of legislation that is not emergency legislation. It's quite astonishing.
So the Scottish Government insists that trans rights are not in competition with women's rights. That's what they say. They say the proposals will be a significant step forward in creating a more equal Scotland where trans people feel valued, included and empowered. How do you respond to that?
I think what we've seen is that a lot of women now feel very second class. They have created a hierarchy of people in Scotland, and women are quite a way down that list. But not only women. I was talking yesterday to people from the Muslim community, and they really feel that this is going to have a big impact on their religious freedoms, because some of them are not able to be in mixed-sex spaces. And the response to that, frankly, from the UN Special Rapporteur, there are two, as you may have come across, who were interviewed by the Scottish Parliament in recent days. There's the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, who says this will be an issue for women and girls. And then the other one, funnily enough, the man, who basically said that if religious groups have a problem with this, they shouldn't, because trans women are actual women, which is a completely circular, nonsensical argument. And unless we have a foundation and understanding that you cannot change sex and that people's sex is real and it matters in certain situations, it's impossible to argue with people.
Extraordinary. Well, thank you, Susan. And do we imagine this will get passed this afternoon, given the debates that you saw last night?
Yeah, I mean, barring a Christmas miracle, which would involve actually probably some of the Labour Party finding their spines, because many of them know this is very, very wrong. I'm astonished that as an opposition party, they are not taking this opportunity to inflict a wound on the SNP, because there are SNP rebels in there who have been really brave and stood up, and this is the first and the biggest revolt that the SNP's ever had to face. I think there are more in the SNP who probably should be and could be saying something, because we believe there is not a majority in favour of this in the Parliament, but it's going to pass, and that is shocking.
Well, Olivia Otley, our political editor, was in here yesterday, and she said she'd been talking to somebody that was an MSP, saying that because there's one rather influential woman is off on maternity leave, and Nicola Sturgeon wants to push this through before she is back because she opposes the bill. But just extraordinary. Susan Smith, thank you very much, co-director for Women Scotland. Now, as millions flock to get home for Christmas, the AA has issued an amber warning for motorists taking to the road tomorrow and on Christmas Eve, with significant delays expected across the country. GB News South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has been investigating what exactly this might mean for those of us making journeys home in the coming days.
Before we tuck into this, we've got this. When it comes to travelling home for Christmas, we're on the road to nowhere. Planes, trains and automobiles grounded, cancelled, snarled up. Travel broadcaster Simon Calder says he's never seen anything like it.
I've been covering disruption at Christmas for longer than I can remember, but frankly, I've never quite seen it as confused and stressful as this.
The RAC is saying there will be 20 million car journeys between now and Christmas, nearly half of those on the 23rd and the 24th. For many, it's a case of jam today, jam tomorrow. And it's pricey too. Petrol is around 153 pence a litre, with diesel at 176, significantly higher than last year. The RAC says we're being heartlessly overcharged. Better to get the train instead? You'll be lucky.
If you're on the roads or the railways, the advice is travel as early as you possibly can. Things will be getting very busy on Friday on the roads as well as Christmas Eve. And frankly, if you don't get where you need to be by Friday night on the trains, well, it could be too late. Some lines have no trains at all on Christmas Eve, and on others they will be shutting down very early indeed.
That's because of another strike by the RMT, this time from 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve. And it's not much better in the skies either.
In the skies, well, it's too early to tell what the effect will be of the UK Border Force strike, which is going to affect passport control at Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Cardiff, Birmingham and Glasgow from Friday morning onwards. The airlines, the airports and the authorities seem pretty confident it won't have too much of an effect.
The experts are pumping out the usual public announcements. Check your car before you travel, leave plenty of time, wrap up warm, and expect the unexpected. When we finally get home to loved ones, enjoy the festive break, they say, because there's more strikes and travel chaos in the new year. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Thank you, Jeff. Right, I am back here with my panel this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by NHS Dr René Hoenderkamp. I can't say your name without doing a r. And journalist and political editor. I've just given you a promotion, Emma.
Wow, amazing. Can I have the pay bump?
Political commentator Emma Burnell. Right, Emma, asylum seeker story. Asylum seekers are 3 times likely to get a place in the UK than in France. What is this about?
I think what's happened is certain organisations have crunched the numbers from a particular point. That point is, I think, post-Brexit, but it isn't post any change in the laws because most of them haven't really changed yet. What the argument is that there are fewer people receiving asylum in France than there are in the UK. Where there are complications in those numbers are the UK is basically what's happening is they've reprioritised who's getting their cases dealt with early, and most of those are coming from war-torn nations where we do, so 77% of those will receive asylum under the statistics in the story. We also have had the policy that we are accepting refugees from Ukraine, from Hong Kong, and from Afghanistan because of our historic links with the latter two. We were we oversaw Hong Kong until quite recently. We were in Afghanistan. A lot of that with a lot of the people who are seeking asylum and people who assisted the British government, the British Army, and Ukraine. Obviously, we are very proud of the role that we've played, and in fact, I will be spending my Christmas Day with a Ukrainian refugee family who are living with my parents. So
very nice.
Very excited about that.
Renee, 77% of asylum seekers were granted the right to stay in the UK in 12 months to September. That's really high.
It is, and I think Emma's right that lots of these things are taking figures where we would have taken all these people from Hong Kong and Afghanistan. However, I think the stat that's worrying is 81% of Albanians who come here, many of them on little boats, get accepted. If you look at other countries that have a no Albania policy, because Albania is not a war-torn country, they're not fleeing from anything there that we should shelter them from, then, Sweden, for example, accepts 0. And I think that's probably where we need to move, because we are a very small country. Our public services are breaking and we can't cope. As much as I would love us to be able to give homes to all of these people, and I would, in an ideal world, of course I would. But in an ideal world, I'd like the NHS to be able to treat everybody in a month as well. And
classroom sizes to be smaller.
And classroom sizes to be smaller. And for children leaving care to actually have an ongoing journey that actually is beneficial. So I think we need to sort out home first. I really do.
It's not a very popular attitude, that, though, is it, these days? Sort out home first.
Well,
you probably think it's way too popular.
I mean, it depends what you mean by sort out home, doesn't it? I mean, I can't disagree that we absolutely should be taking our public services off their knees. I think they've been massively run down for 12 years. Obviously, I do. But I think there is also an argument that there are people who we would welcome to be part of our economy, part of our country, part of those public services. I think there are... Once we accept, which I do, that we need a system that says some people can come and some people aren't, then you have to talk about priorities.
Are you okay with that high number of Albanians being...
Well, that's what I was literally just about to say, that I would probably prioritise bringing in people from somewhere like Eritrea over Albania. There are rules. We should argue about the rules and then we should make sure that those rules are enforced. But that enforcement probably includes things that you wouldn't necessarily like legal and safe routes, which is, frankly, one of the best ways to break the business model of the disgusting human traffickers, who I think we can all agree are the real bad guys.
But you can get on a plane from Albania to here with
well, yeah, and as I say, if there is not
a
a legal route from Albania, that's a different matter. And I think that's the first part, which is sorting out the rules, having a proper robust system that we say this is what we do and don't do, and then having ways that actually people can access that system properly. And that's where I think we're falling down a lot.
If, as an Albanian, you're paying a few £1,000s to a people trafficker to bring you across on a dinghy rather than getting on a plane, that has to be because you have a criminal record and you wouldn't be allowed here on a plane.
I don't know, and I wouldn't want to speculate.
What other explanation could there be?
I don't know, and I wouldn't want to speculate. It's not. I'm not going to suddenly accuse thousands of people of being criminals and coming here and knowing. I just have no idea, and I don't think that it's
I don't mind. I think
journalism.
Well, the journalist in me is asking what could be any other possible explanation.
Yeah,
what am I missing?
Or you just don't want to be, labelled, tagged, and they know where you are. Surely. So maybe it means that you're not necessarily a criminal, but you're coming in here for reasons that we wouldn't actually sanction as a job.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to just get into the ether and disappear.
Right, let's talk about expensive turkeys.
Must we?
Because that is the sort of gear change we do on daytime TV. Morrison's are selling a Christmas turkey for £147. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Its prices rose by 25% on last year. Britain's battling festive cost of living crunch. I mean, if it's now 150 quid, it was still quite expensive last year if it went up by 25%. I've been asking you as well this morning. I want you to email me with the most extraordinary, ludicrously expensive items that you've seen while you've been shopping for your Christmas this year. That seems more expensive than usual. How's your Christmas shopping looking, Renee?
Yeah,
Are you looking at the figures?
So I can't even comment on that. I hate Christmas. I'm a real bar humbug.
Me too.
I think it's the biggest commercial rip-off that exists.
It's a headache.
It's going to push people into debt forever who are already struggling. So I hate it. And I have to say, I hate turkey. So this story for me is a disaster. You'd have to pay me £147 to eat the turkey.
So what do you have instead?
Beef. I'm having beef.
Are you? Oh, you are maverick, aren't you? What about you, Emma?
Well, my brother-in-law is a chef, so he will be providing a turkey crown down at beef, at gammon, everything. He's a wonderful, wonderful chef. We're having an amazing... So we've got, as I said, we've got my parents are coming with their people who are living with them at the moment. My sister has her close friend living with her because she's recovering from a cancer operation, and her 2 children will be there. It's going to be one of those wonderful kind of everyone comes and gathers around the table. My job is to make the Christmas cake. Every year I make a boozy chocolate Christmas cake.
Oh, lovely.
It is lovely. But I tell you that when you talk about what's got more expensive, because I don't buy it the rest of the year round, butter.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Butter has.
Yes, extortionate. But you see, what feels so cruel, doesn't it? We've had these 2 disrupted Christmases where, you know, can you see your family, can you not? You can't, oh, I hated it. This year, we all just wanted to... The instinct is to just, like, throw the boat out, right? We're going to celebrate. And yet you look at the receipt in your hand and you're like, what have I just paid for those things?
And you wander around looking at gifts to buy presents for people for the sake of buying a present. You know, it's not being done to celebrate what's going on, you know, baby Jesus being born. It isn't, for most people. Obviously, for some it is, and that's great. But the rest of us, I find it really, really pressurising. I walked around last week, actually, and I thought, oh, this is depressing me.
It is pressurising, isn't it? But then if you're a guilty working mum, which I am, then you end up spending too much on the kids at Christmas just to cure your own conscience.
Of course.
I don't have children, but I'm sure the cat will be getting some extra treats.
My 4-year-old has asked for a phone.
Oh, my God.
You can imagine what Mummy said, can't you?
I can imagine. Right, we've got to the end of the first hour. We'll be back with more after this short break.
Join me, Calvin Robinson,
on Christmas Eve and Day to explore how this special period has become a source of hope with an especially festive show. Expect Christmas carols, nativity readings, and interviews with special guests. And it's all filmed in a church for that proper Christmas feeling. Christmas, a message of hope at 2 p.m. on Christmas Eve and 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Christmas Day. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Good morning, welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. The Royal College of Nursing will schedule further strike action for January unless the government open pay talks today. Apparently, Rishi Sunak has been in charge for just 8 short weeks. I'm going to be joined later by John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent, and Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, to discuss whether or not they've been impressed by him. That's our Twitter poll as well today. I've got Simon Calder here in just a minute to tell you what the travel is going to be like over the Christmas period, if you can be bothered to go anywhere. And as always, I'm going to be joined by my brilliant panel with analysis on today's biggest stories. All coming up after a look at the latest news with Rihanna.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Train passengers are being warned their Christmas getaway could be jeopardised after Network Rail workers in Scotland announced strike action. Major disruptions expected from 6 p.m. on Saturday until Tuesday morning, with more planned in the new year. Air travel's also set to be affected, with Border Force staff walking off the job tomorrow, striking every day until January the 1st, except for next Tuesday. Travel expert Simon Calder says the situation won't improve anytime soon.
I'm afraid if you're on the rails, possibly even in the skies, then you could face serious problems. I've never seen the trains in such disarray. There is not going to be any improvement, can you believe, until the 9th of January.
Meanwhile, health leaders are warning of knock-on effects following this week's NHS strikes. The government's reportedly looking to fast-track a pay rise next year to avert fresh action. Scotland's Shadow Health Minister, Dr Sandesh Gillane, says money isn't the only issue. Patient safety also needs to be addressed.
Imagine if you guys were going to work, or your viewers were going to work, and not knowing if that day somebody was going to die because of something that you couldn't control, because there was a lack of support, because there was a lack of equipment, because there was a lack of things going on that would have meant that somebody died. It'd be terrifying.
National highways workers in London and South East England are also striking, walking out today until Christmas Day. The public and commercial services unions acknowledge the action will likely inconvenience travellers, but it's blaming the government for making a below-inflation pay offer. Further actions planned for next week and in the new year unless a deal can be reached. The Chancellor is being urged to introduce a pump pricing watchdog to crack down on profiteering retailers. In an open letter to Jeremy Hunt, MPs warn a fall in wholesale petrol and diesel prices aren't being passed on to motorists. It comes as the RAC announced the average price of a litre of petrol is currently around 153 pence. That's 7p more than this time last year, while diesel's up 27 pence at 176p. The MPs say Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel UK, should be the new Pump Watch Commissioner. He told GB News retailers are taking advantage of drivers.
Supermarkets buy direct from the refinery. They don't buy through the wholesaler and that sort of thing. So they're making huge profits on drivers. And that 15 to 20p equates to something like £7 to £10 per driver. Every time a driver comes into a forecourt, the retailer is wringing his hands in delight that, oh, here's another £10 worth of profit.
A controversial gender reform bill looks set to finally be passed in Scotland later today, following days of debate and protests. MSPs argued into the early hours of the morning at Holyrood as they considered over 150 amendments. The bill will reduce the time legally needed for applicants to live as their acquired gender from 2 years to 3 months. It'll also lower the minimum age to 16. The Shadow Chancellor's accused the government of losing control of the economy after revised data showed GDP fell more than first thought in the third quarter. Rachel Reeves tweeted that the Tories are leaving millions of working people paying the price for the Conservatives' actions. That's after the Office for National Statistics said gross domestic product fell by 0.3% between July and September. Ukraine's president has told the US his country is alive and kicking and will never surrender. Addressing Congress, Volodymyr Zelensky said military aid is an investment in democracy and not charity. President Joe Biden told him Americans will stand proudly with the Ukrainian people through its war with Russia for as long as it takes. A former advisor to George W. Bush says President Zelensky travelling from the front line to the US is a stark reminder of what's at stake. And the Queen Consort and the Princess of Wales have been given ceremonial military roles as part of plans for the King's first Trooping the Colour. The parade, to be held on the 17th of June next year, marks the monarch's official birthday. King Charles will ride on horseback alongside Prince William, who'll take the Colonel of the Welsh Guards title from his father. They'll be watched by Catherine, who's now Colonel of the Irish Guards, and Camilla, who'll replace Prince Andrew as Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Bev.
Good morning, welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. 999 calls dropped by 25% during yesterday's ambulance walkouts. Interesting that. The Royal College of Nursing have said that they will schedule further action, strike action for January unless the government open pay talks today. We'll get the latest from Ellie Costello in just a moment. Remember Rishi Sunak? We don't see that much of him, do we? Well, he's been in charge for 8 weeks, but I, for one, am not exactly sure what he's been doing. Are you? Our Twitter poll is asking if you think he's being a good and impressive Prime Minister. Vote at GB News. And I'll be joined by the smartest guests on TV in about 15 minutes with a look at the day's biggest stories, including one woman didn't want to invite her brother's pal over for Christmas. Is that a selfish decision in the festive period? It's my last day, Simon Calder. Stop sniggering. We can go a bit lighter. And of course, this show is nothing without you and your views. Today on Twitter, we've got a poll. I've just told you about this. Rishi Sunak. He's been in charge for 8 weeks. 87% of you so far are not impressed by him. Plenty of you lot will vote Conservative, and you don't even like him. What chance has he got? Keep your votes coming in. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I am going to come to Simon Calder in just a moment. He's in the studio waiting to tell us all about our Christmas travel plans. But first of all, the RCN has given the government until tonight to open pay talks for nurses, or it says that it will order a fresh wave of strikes in the new year. Ongoing strike action has already had a massive impact in the lead up to Christmas, so how will the government respond? GB News South East reporter Ellie Costello is live outside St Thomas's Hospital in London. Good morning, Ellie. No strikes going on this morning, but what have people arriving at the hospital said to you this morning?
Well, hi, Bev. Like you say, no strike going on today, but there is a large queue outside Accident and Emergency here at St Thomas's. I've just spoken to a father who actually wanted to bring his poorly son to Accident and Emergency 2 days ago on Tuesday, but didn't do so because he was afraid that because of strike action, his son wouldn't get the care that he needs. So he's presented with his son at Accident and Emergency today. Looks like they've got a long wait ahead of them, and there's plenty of other people in that line that have waited several days with their symptoms as well. And that's the concern, Bev, that although today isn't an official strike day for ambulances or for nurses, that we are going to see huge pressure on the NHS with people presenting for the first time in 48 hours. Many of them heeding advice not to call for an ambulance or to present themselves to A&E whilst strike action was taking place. place. And Bev, I do just want to bring you some new figures that have just come out in the last few minutes, which is that a quarter of ambulance patients in England waited more than 1 hour to be handed over to A&E from the ambulance outside the hospital. Those are numbers from last week. 4 in 10 patients had to wait at least 30 minutes to be transferred to A&E, and those numbers are higher than any winter previously. So that just kind of describes the context that we were already in before the strike action this week. And the particular concern today is those people who have missed appointments in the past 2 days and those who have deteriorated significantly in the past 48 hours. We know that ambulance calls yesterday were down 25% in England. So people who may have previously called for an ambulance decided not to as the strike was taking place. Now, speaking this morning, Saffron Cordery, who is the chief executive of NHS providers, she says that the NHS is braced for a surge demand in emergency treatment. She says there is a very difficult picture across the NHS, a deeply challenging situation for social care as well. Now, the Royal College of Nursing has given the Health Minister, Stephen Barclay, until midnight today to come back to the table with a fresh pay offer. Already there's an offer on the table of between 4 and 5%. The Royal College of Nursing is asking for 5% on top of inflation. That's about 19%, although they have said that they are willing to compromise on this. Now, there are reports this morning that Steve Barclay is looking to fast track a pay rise next year for nurses in order to avoid a fresh set of strikes. But the Royal College of Nursing have already said if they don't get a new pay offer on the table today, there will be a fresh set of strikes in 2023.
Thank you, Ellie. Ellie Costello there doing a superb job. We had Will Quince, the Health Minister, saying yesterday, don't do anything risky. And we've had Matthew Taylor, head of the NHS Confederation and former chief advisor to Tony Blair, talking, I think it was this morning, and he said that don't get drunk should become permanent advice to save the NHS. No thanks. Please just let us get drunk if we want to. Please stop trying to micromanage my life. Joining me now, travel correspondent Simon Calder. Simon, don't get drunk. This is our advice. Where can I go that is going to allow me to freely get drunk over Christmas?
Anywhere you want to, really. Look, it's a fantastic time to be a traveller, and millions of people are.
That too.
Many of us do enjoy a drink as we're travelling, of course, done respectfully and never on ScotRail, where it is still banned. It's going to be a really successful Christmas for millions of travellers. However, I need to be absolutely upfront and say that I've been covering travel disruption at Christmas since biblical times, and I've never seen quite such a difficult combination of circumstances. I guess starting with the railways, where we have, even on a day like today, where there is no strikes anywhere in the railway, we have massive complications. So at least 40 expresses on Avanti West Coast connecting London Euston with the West Midlands, North West England, North Wales and Southern Scotland have been cancelled today due to crew shortage.
Crew shortage?
Yep.
Not enough people.
OK. If you look at East Midlands Railway, they haven't got any strikes except tomorrow. They've got a strike by members of the Unite Union. So the last train, if you were hoping to leave London and get to Leicester, Nottingham, Derby or Sheffield, last train is at 7:35 this evening. Really limited service tomorrow, and that's all going in ahead of the national rail strike that begins tea time on Christmas Eve. But the effect of this strike, which is by members of the RMT union working for Network Rail, is that services will be really curtailed from lunchtime onwards on Friday. And the last train from places like Edinburgh, from Newcastle, from Leeds to London goes before 10 o'clock in the morning.
What about flights, Simon?
Yes, most
Surely
people...
that's the easy option, right? We've got baggage handlers striking now.
No. Look, the baggage
now.
handlers, that was one of these disputes, like the security staff at Eurostar, where on my scale of Christmas disruption possibilities, it barely made a 1.
Right.
Because it only affected a small number of airlines. Right. And it's the sort of strike, I've seen these things dozens of times before, and I'm so glad to say they normally get resolved just in time. And that's certainly what happened with Eurostar passengers. Now, the big issue is going to be tomorrow when UK border staff who belong to the PCS union are walking out and leaving their posts at passport control at Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow and Cardiff airports. And they basically are saying, we want more than 2% pay, and we're walking out. Now, the Home Office, which runs all this, says it's fine. We've got contingency plans in place. We've trained servicemen and women to give up their Christmases to come and check passports. But of course, with the best one in the world, these great women and men, they're not going to have the expertise, the experience of UK Border Force staff.
What about things like, if you're listening to this and you know now that your train isn't going to go, but you've got family you want to see, how easy is it to jump on a coach, for instance? Right,
OK, coach is absolutely my Christmas staple. That fantastic network on National Express, on Megabus, on Flixbus now. Great women and men driving these things 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The only form of public transport, actually, in the UK on Christmas Day. The trouble is, lots of people, particularly those of us who know how fantastic the buses are, have already booked them up, and there's only a limited number of seats available. But as I say, most people will get away. If you're not going out of those 6 airports, I'll run through them again: Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Cardiff, Birmingham and Glasgow, then it's going to be fine. But as somebody who used to frisk people at Gatwick Airport, as a security.
Is that actually your job?
It was a job, not a hobby. No. Please let me remind you that I know.
I wonder why you brought your wash bag. I thought, Simon Calder's brought his own makeup bag on.
No, no. It's simply to remind people that the rules are going to be changing, but not for another 18 months. So therefore, you've got to have the usual old 100 millilitres in a resealable plastic bag if you're flying out.
Great tip, because they recently announced we're going to take the limit off liquids that you could take on aeroplanes.
And lots of people are going to be thinking, oh, great, I'll pop a bottle of something nice in my cabin baggage. Please don't. And also, look, do not wrap up any presents you're keeping in cabin baggage, because otherwise I'm going to sort of look at it and I'm going to think, well, I'm not really sure what's in here. And I'm going to undo all your lovely wrapping.
Oh, no.
So wait until you get there.
That's a good tip. Yeah. Simon, as somebody who's spent your life travelling and just being, can I call you a veteran travel reporter?
You can call me anything you want, yes.
As a veteran travel reporter and journalist, you understand the beauty of travel and what it gives to a person. How do you feel at the moment, having looked back on the last 3 years, of how difficult it's making human movement?
Yeah, because, look, here's the thing. Everybody now appreciates how valuable travel is for us and how important it is to go out and experience the world, different cultures, different cuisines, amazing sights. Our time is limited, and I think we've appreciated in the past 3 years just that it's memories that's the most important thing rather than possessions. So that's why I'm hoping everybody is going to get away and have a wonderful holiday this Christmas. You jolly well deserve it. And in the new year, well, start making your wish list now for the places you're going to go next year. Almost everybody is going to get where they want to be and have a lovely time.
Have you been thinking, since we did all the lockdowns and you know, all of the restrictions of going abroad and you needed to do your PCR test, and your vaccines and mandates and all the rubbish we've had to deal with, did you keep thinking, oh, well, next month we'll go back to normal?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was always hugely over-optimistic. Well, I make no apology for it. Travel is the industry of human happiness, and you've got to keep optimistic, but I got it badly wrong. And the idea that we would still, right now, for instance, I'd love to go to Hong Kong, but there's still multiple testing and it's tricky and so on. So I think... Yeah.
When is your prediction, Simon Calder? When will we be living back in the normal that we used to have rather than this horrible new normal? OK,
I'll give it another 6 months. Remember, the US still will only allow people who are fully vaccinated in. So that's really important for a lot of people who would love to be going off to the US. And by the way, there's a terrible winter storm coming in for the Midwest and Texas. So if you're flying tomorrow, well, check in advance.
Right, I will get you back in 6 months and hopefully we'll be living a normal life by then. Thank you so much, Simon Calder. Now, I've got a Twitter poll up asking you whether you have been impressed with Rishi Sunak's first 8 weeks, it's only 8 weeks, in the job. So far, 86% of you, 87%, thank you for whoever just did that last vote, 87%, it's 2,500 of you nearly that have voted, are not impressed by him. 13% of you are. If you are, please tell me why. What am I missing? OK, after the break, I'm going to be back with my panel at the Breakfast Bar to discuss the top stories of the day, including reaction to Netflix making password sharing illegal. Lots to discuss. That's after the break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News in our very Christmassy studio. Let me introduce my panel to you again this morning. NHS doctor Renee Hoendekamp and journalist and political commentator Emma Burnell is here. Now, the first story we are doing, Renee, is... OK, this is a serious story. You won't have seen this in the paper. This is why I'm looking a little bit baffled. We've had to take this off the internet. It isn't in a newspaper. Scotland, oh no, are we doing this one, are we?
I thought so. But
oh, OK. Do you know what? It's the last day. I go home today. Can you tell I need a bit of a break? Can you tell we all need a bit of a break, Emma? OK, I will liven up. This is not, it's still a serious story. Scotland poised to pass the law to let people aged 16 and 17 change sex on birth certificate. Go, Renee.
Yeah, you know...
Someone bring me a mince pie and a glass of sherry, please.
I don't understand why Nicola Sturgeon is pushing this so hard. So the bits in here, in this law, that I really, really object to was that convicted sex offenders will no longer be allowed... will be allowed to change their gender, which was one of the amendments that got voted down to not let that happen. So, you know, you'll end up with men who still have all of their tackle, necessarily, in female prisons when they have been violent to women in order to get into prison.
Yeah.
It's obscene. And the other bit of it that I'm really unhappy about is that children, and we're talking about 16, 17, 18-year-olds and adults, will no longer need a psychiatric diagnosis of gender dysphoria before they can actually transition and get to the point. And I'm sorry, gender dysphoria is in part a psychiatric decision. It needs a psychiatrist to actually assess it. There needs to be therapy to help work through everything and make sure it is absolutely the right decision for that person.
Absolutely.
So I'm very unhappy with this bill.
Yeah, me too. Go on, Emma. I know you feel strongly about this as well, don't you?
I do. As a radical feminist, someone who has been raised by a radical feminist, I have always believed that my sex is real and unfortunately the basis of much oppression in society, and that gender is part of that oppression. It's a social construct designed to fit us into little boxes. And we have spent years trying to break down those boxes and say women can do anything they want to do. You are not a woman if you wear lipstick. You are not a woman if you do a traditionally female role. We should be opening up. We should be breaking down this construct, not reinforcing it in law to say this is what a woman is like, this is what a man is like. So that's the philosophical problem I have with it. But I'm 100% with you, Renee. The idea that vulnerable women in prisons should be locked in those prisons with men with penises, with whatever they call themselves, if they have a penis. There's a wonderful campaigner on this called Joan Smith, who says the thing about a rapist is they carry their weapon with them everywhere. And that is a derogation of the absolute human rights of these female prisoners. And, making a case for prisoners is not always easy to do, but we can all see that that's just something that should not happen.
I'm so baffled by why Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP are so keen to push this through.
So we discussed this outside, and I wonder if she obviously relies on the Green Party for her coalition. The Greens are really, really into this for some weird reason, because I don't think it is a Green issue. I really don't.
I mean, they can pretty much turn anything into a Green issue these days, can't they? I'm sure there's some reason.
And I think Nicola needs to cement her coalition. And I also wonder if she wants to just put more wide space between the laws in England and Scotland. So it's another difference between her and London.
We saw in Matt Hancock's diaries that the decisions that we made here were largely influenced by wanting to be in competition with Nicola Sturgeon. Do you... I mean, it was shocking to read, for instance, masking kids in schools. We weren't going to do it in England. Nicola Sturgeon did it. By Matt Hancock's own admission, the government then said, oh, well, we need to do it too. We need to be seen to be as careful as her. Do you worry that this will kind of trickle down and that Westminster will say, quick, we need to also do this?
I mean, I worry about all of this trans ideology actually trickling down. I really do. And I think we see it. We see, the NHS trusts, like Sussex this week, have given out advice on how to birth a man. Well, I'm sorry, you're not birthing a man, you're birthing a woman, because a woman is...
What do you mean? So, OK, this is where I get all twists all my melons, these sorts of things. So birthing a man, this is a female-born biological female that transitions to a male gender, retains a vagina and gives birth.
Yes. So Sussex Trust this week are teaching their midwives, it's costing £100,000, on the words to use and the language.
Oh, this has been going on in maternity services for ages.
Yeah, but you see, it is trickling down slowly. And again, we might say it's only £100,000, but I don't care. We're raising women. Anything we can do here on this panel, because we are women and solely because we are women, is being given to men. So we no longer breastfeed, we chest feed. We don't have periods because we're women, we're people that bleed. We don't have smears. We are people with cervixes who have smears. And so it goes on. And it's a tiny, tiny chip away at women. And I actually feel we've gone back to the 70s with the radical feminists, where they were fighting and being shouted at by men. You know, all you need to do is sleep with a man. Now it's, no, you're not a woman, be quiet.
Because the same thing is not happening to men. This is the interesting thing. You know, if you want to know what's the definition of feminism, is it something that affects men, or sexism affects women, sorry, rather than men? Is there a male equivalent? There isn't a male equivalent. The word man is not being rewritten in the dictionaries.
No, and quite often you'll see so-called progressive groups. You know, I very much think of myself as a progressive, but I will fight for progressive being progressive. So calling men men and women non-men, as if we're some subset. And that's appalling. I think it's really important that we recognise that this is not a left-right issue. You know, most of the women that I know who are really passionate about this are considerably to my left, and I know that yeah, I'm left-wing on this panel, but this is not about left-right issues, and there is a really strong you know, radical feminist left-wing argument to say, actually, it's really important that we recognise sex and the intrinsic biological differences that happen, and make sure that we build a world in which those are minimised. You know, the disadvantages of being a woman, or the disadvantages of being a man, because there are some, are minimised, and therefore we can make sure that we therefore have a space that gender doesn't really come into it.
Yeah.
Whereas what we've done instead is go, but actually gender's the massive real thing and sex doesn't matter.
Yeah, and actually in healthcare, sex really matters. You know, I will not get prostate cancer.
Yeah.
But if I blur the, you know, the edges of that, I might miss someone who will.
Well, even in provision, if you read Caroline Criado-Perez's fascinating book about all the things that we have embedded in healthcare, they're actually incredibly sexist because they're not designed. They're designed for the default male body.
That's right.
Rather than the default female body, and that's the sort of thing that we should be addressing.
Yes, I agree.
Well, thank goodness for women like us talking about it on the telly, because you probably wouldn't see this debate on the BBC. So well done, ladies. Right, after the break, we'll be debating Rishi Sunak. In the short time that he's been in charge, has he done a good job as Prime Minister? Send me your views as well, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Don't go away, that's all after the news with Rihanna.
Good morning, it's 11:31. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Train passengers are being warned their Christmas getaway could be jeopardised after Network Rail workers in Scotland announced strike action. Major disruptions expected from 6 p.m. on Saturday until Tuesday morning, with more planned in the new year. Air travel's also set to be affected, with Border Force staff walking off the job tomorrow, striking every day until January the 1st, except for next Tuesday. Travel expert Simon Calder says the situation won't improve anytime soon.
I'm afraid if you're on the rails, possibly even in the skies, then you could face serious problems. I've never seen the trains in such disarray. There is not going to be any improvement, can you believe, until the 9th of January.
Meanwhile, health leaders are warning of knock-on effects following this week's NHS strikes. The government's reportedly looking to fast-track a pay rise next year to avert fresh action. The Chancellor is being urged to introduce a pump pricing watchdog to crack down on profiteering retailers. In an open letter to Jeremy Hunt, MPs warn a fall in wholesale petrol and diesel prices aren't being passed on to motorists. It comes as the RAC announced that the average price of a litre of petrol is currently around 153 pence. That's 7p more than this time last year, while diesel's up 27 pence at 176p. And Ukraine's president has told the US his country is alive and kicking and will never surrender. Addressing Congress, Volodymyr Zelensky said military aid's an investment in democracy and not charity. President Joe Biden told him Americans will stand proudly with the Ukrainian people through its war with Russia for as long as it takes. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2067 and €1.1357. The price of gold is £1,501.80 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,522 points.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Very good morning. It is 11:36. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Challenging optical issues when I'm reading up close and far away. Now, Rishi Sunak has been in charge since October, facing a whole heap of issues that this country needs to solve, whether that's the cost of living crisis, rising inflation, and now the biggest industrial strike action in decades. I'm asking, do you think for the short period that he's been PM, he has done a good job of leading the country? So joining me now is John Rentoul, a chief political commentator at The Independent and leader of the Reform UK Party, Richard Tice. OK, gentlemen, this is purely your opinion. This is your opinion piece. You're writing a comment leader in a newspaper. John Rentoul, how do you think Rishi Sunak has done so far in a short 8 weeks?
He's done about as well as can be expected. He's done better than anybody else could have done in that job, and he's certainly done better than the two main alternatives, who were Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. He hasn't been perfect. I think the way he's handled the nurses' strike has been a little difficult, but I think he, as he said when he gave evidence to that parliamentary committee on whenever it was now, Tuesday, he said he's only been there for 7 or 8 weeks, so you can't expect miracles.
Kind of, John. But I watched that super committee grilling that he got, and I thought that he used that as a little too much of an excuse. He was Chancellor of the Exchequer. He has been in that government for a very long time. So to kind of sit there, do you know what he reminds me of? He reminds me all the time of a boy that's just about to sit his 11 plus. And he's been hothoused to get into Winchester College, which is what he was. And he's kind of got a parent on either side saying, do better, do better. But he's very good at remembering rote learning, but nothing comes from the heart, John Rentoul, does it?
I don't agree with that at all. I think he's extremely competent. I think he's the best available Prime Minister at the moment.
That is a terrible indictment. That is, talk about damning with faint praise. It's the best you've got.
Well, that's how politics works, isn't it? He's the least bad option. I thought he was very impressive when he made that statement in the House of Commons on the asylum system. I thought a lot of Labour MPs stood up and asked him what they thought were all good questions. And he actually had the answers because he'd been doing the research.
Richard Tice, you're shaking your head in disgust. How do you think he's doing?
I don't know what Kool-Aid John Rentoul's been drinking this morning, but I want some of it because it's utterly extraordinary. There's more hope and vision and joy in your Christmas tree and the baubles, Bev, than there is with the visionless Prime Minister we've got at the moment. What a damning indictment that you say that this Prime Minister is the best of a bad lot. Look, he's been there 7 or 8 weeks. Where's the hope? Where's the vision? Where's the optimism as we move forward to a new year? Everybody I talk to of a certain age, they say this is far worse than the 1970s. And this has happened on his watch, both as Chancellor and now as Prime Minister. He's got no solutions. He's like a boring managing director of a subsidiary of a big multinational corporation.
The only time, I would say, the only time I've seen him get really excited was when he was talking at the Confederation of British Industry and he was trying to sell, OK? So he's a bit of a salesman when it comes to the financial world, because that's what he used to do, right? And he was talking about the future of artificial intelligence and how UK was going to be. And I thought, you're just a bit of a computer geek and you're really excited by the idea of a centralised banking digital system. You're probably quite excited about the idea of a technical ID system in the country. But what else does he have, John? I don't know what his values are.
Well, Richard doesn't like it because Richard's candidate, who was Liz Truss, crashed and burned because she.
My candidate. I'm from Reform UK. I'm not a Conservative, John. What are you talking about? You've lost the plot this morning.
You're in favour of this. You're in favour of this nonsense about borrowing to pay for tax cuts, which I'm afraid was utterly disastrous.
You mean growing the economy, John? It used to be known as growing the economy until we were taken over by a socialist government, it seems. Go on, Richard Tice, what were you about to say?
I'm in favour of growth. I'm the only one who's been talking about growing our way out of this crisis by cutting government waste, cutting daft old EU regulations, by cutting taxes for the lowest paid and the least well off. If you look at my plans on our website, it's all there, it's all funded. You've got to grow you out of your crisis. All we've got at the moment is 2 forms of socialism, red socialism, red socialism. And what we've got is we're colder, we're poorer, we know that our taxes are going up, there's no hope, there's no ambition, there's no vision. It's an absolute catastrophe for this great country of ours. We can do so much better. And that's why we need new leadership and a change of direction.
Go on, John.
Well, I mean, that was lovely. We'd love to build pie in the sky and sandcastles in the air, but it's not possible. We have real problems to deal with, including the fact that we've just spent 400 billion on dealing with coronavirus, and that is going to make us poorer. Yes, anyone who doesn't accept that is going to struggle to come to terms with the real problems that this country faces.
But John, he was spending the money. It was Rishi Sunak that got us into this hole. He was the guy in the Exchequer during COVID just dishing out left, right and centre for a virus with an infection fatality rate of less than 0.5% for the vast majority of the population. And now he's there telling us we've got to suck it up and, turn your lights down, turn your heating down.
I'm afraid, but no, Bev, the British people wanted that money to be spent. They wanted jobs to be protected. They wanted the furlough scheme, and they wanted the support for small businesses.
Well, I don't think they would have wanted that if they understood the
You disagree with the lockdown. but I'm afraid you're in a minority.
Well, that's because people were given the wrong information about how dangerous the coronavirus was. Most people have now had it, got out of bed and went, oh, you're right, it wasn't as fatal as the government were telling me it was going to be after all. I'm not saying that some people didn't lose their lives, they did, and that's awful and it's tragic.
It wasn't as fatal after the vaccines arrived, no.
No, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. It wasn't as fatal after Omicron arrived. That's just not true. Go on, Richard Tice.
Look, we are where we are. Forget the past. How do we dig ourselves out of this hole? You can't tax your way out of a crisis. You've got to grow your way out of a crisis. And I say, there are numerous ways where you can save tens and tens of billions of pounds. The waste in the government is prolific. It's everywhere. You've got to cut taxes for the lowest paid small businesses, create growth, cut the waste, stop giving subsidies to renewable energy firms, about 11 billion quid that they say they don't need because they're now the cheapest form of energy. Get 2 million people who are currently on benefits back into work because we've got a labour shortage. That'll save you 20 to 30 billion quid. Cut the daft HS2. That'll save you 50 billion quid. All of a sudden, you're talking about real money, real growth, real jobs. All John wants to do is shake his socialist head.
Gentlemen,
I've got a Blairite head, if you don't mind.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your conversation. It's a bit like going to be a Christmas dinner in a few houses, that, isn't it? Thank you so much, John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent and leader of the Reform UK Party, Richard Tice. Right, Renee Hundekamp and Emma Burnell are still with me. Would you like to just comment on that? How's he doing for you, Rishi Sunak?
Oh, no, look, I think that we got the leader that the MPs had decided we always should have had. So Truss was always going to be rubbish. She was useless in communicating, so she had her faults. And I think she had a good plan that if she'd have communicated it properly, been out there every single day on her lectern, telling the markets and the people what she was doing, what the plan was, where we were going, we may not be where we are now with Rishi.
Emma Burnell, you're a socialist. You must love Rishi Sunak.
I don't think he's remotely socialist.
Well, with his high tax, low spend economy.
Well, the low spend is part of the problem, isn't it? I mean,
he's
got high taxes. Yes, we are being taxed ridiculously in ridiculous ways. But what we're not doing is actually investing. We've had a state that's been cut to the bone over the last 12 years, which is part of the problem. We actually need a state that can support the economy, not one that's a drag on it. At the moment, we are not seeing anything like socialism, and it's hilarious when it's described as such. I mean, and it's also quite funny because calling John Rentoul, who, as himself described just there, he's a Blairite. He's not on the wild left of the Labour Party. And the idea that those fairly centrist ideas are extreme is the problem, I think, with some of our debate, that we don't actually talk about what we really think. We just label each other and scream at each other and talk over each other.
I don't do the labelling anymore because I think that COVID threw left and right up in the air. I think it's almost quite hard to tick those boxes anymore. Anyway, we must move on. This is a story really important. It's not in the newspapers at the moment. It might be after today. This is about forcing vaccination on people who do not have capacity. And it's one particular case that's been in court. It's an adult, Renee, a young man in his 20s, who has the mental age of an 18-month-old. It's gone to court because his GP realised that he hadn't been vaccinated against COVID. He'd had COVID, he survived. And they have taken this family to court to give this to him. His mother does not want him to have it, his parents. What do you make of this?
So I think ethically this is a fascinating case. And I think I've sat and scratched my head over this long and hard. It throws up many, many different questions ethically. Look, I think we need children to be protected by the state when things are going wrong, when their families are going wrong, or even medical decisions are going wrong. However, we have one case here, and I'm sure there are many others. So I don't think this is isolated, and that's why we need to look at it. Where
there are many of these around the country.
Yeah, I'm sure. And there's an adult who has the mental age of a toddler, and his parents, his family have looked after him beautifully for his life, given him all of his childhood vaccines. He's on no medication. He has had a tricky start to life. He has a heart condition.
And he has the flu vaccine every year.
He does.
And he has a heart condition. And we know that myocarditis is a risk in young men with the mRNA vaccine.
So what I think this throws up is when this child, whose mental age will never change, so he's always going to be a toddler, reaches 18, why suddenly does the mum's loving care no longer get to make those decisions? Why does the court take over? Because that's what's happened in this case and in all cases. So what I'm thinking about this is maybe we need to look at the law so that when you have a family like this where everything is going well, it's not an acute decision that's just happening over time. Why is there not place in law that the court accepts that this child will always be a child, therefore the mother's legal guardianship over him will always stay in place? That's the issue.
The court judgment says that if they go to give this young man the vaccine and he resists, they will take that as his consent against having it. But he has the mental age of an 18-month-old, Emma, and the mother is terrified because she does not want him to have this.
Well, I don't want to talk about this individual case. I think where we really should be looking at, and I agree with Renee, it's incredibly complex because there are going to be cases like this where you might instinctually side with the mother. Then we will hear another case where a mother has been accused of terrible neglect or has withdrawn care for their own reasons. Maybe they're a Jehovah's Witness and don't believe in blood transfusion and the child suffers appallingly. And there are real complexities between the good of the child and who gets to make that decision. And not in this individual case necessarily, but if you set case precedent, or our law is based on case law, if you set a precedent, that can be misused by other people. So I think it's where my sympathies absolutely lie with the mother, even though I probably disagree with both of you in terms of the vaccine. I
think you should have it.
I don't know this person. I'm not going to make but it's completely as a non-health professional and as a non-parent, I'm not going to say I have an understanding of whether this individual should have this vaccine. I'm saying that decision-making has to be taken at a higher level than that. We need to have an understanding of where we set the rules out and how we make sure that we protect vulnerable children. And that is not always as simple as their parents know better.
I agree, and I think in most cases there is nuance, but for me in this case there is no nuance.
Well, I'm not going to comment on the
because as a healthy, otherwise physically healthy, apart from having a pre-existing heart condition, as a healthy young man, I do believe it should be the parents who have raised him. It should be their decision. Just because he's now above the age of 18, the state should not be swinging in and getting a jab in his arm that he doesn't want. I mean, they could. It goes to the Court of Appeal today. They could literally have a knock on the door tomorrow. If I was that mother, I'd be on the run.
Yeah. No, listen, I'm with you. I understand. And let me tell you, I've done paediatrics and I've seen these children born and I've seen the dedication of these parents who sit by their children's bedside 24 hours a day, do all of their care, change their nasogastric tubes, change their stomas, do everything. So I'm sure that these mothers in these cases, and there are many of them, are the experts here rather than the doctors. And doctors sometimes have to accept that a patient is more expert in their condition than the doctor is because they understand their individuality more. So I think what we're talking about here is needing the courts to say in these cases there needs to be an assessment where the mother is appointed with a lasting power of attorney. And then we wouldn't be having this situation.
Absolutely.
But for me, the court stepping in, as a parent, I would find
it really difficult. And we're living in more and more patrician times where we are infantilised by the state, and I want a smaller state, Emma, not a bigger one.
This is the problem, where the opposite is true, where a parent, sometimes for incredibly good reasons, but the fierceness of that parental love is actually harming the child rather than because of their own...
This is not that. This is not that.
No, this isn't that, but if we set this precedent, that's what worries me. We need to be able to take things on a case-by-case basis, and if we set a precedent, that is a concern.
Which is why we need some sort of processing space to actually give over the power in these cases.
Lighter topic, ladies. Netflix. I know, we talk about them a lot. We're not talking about Harry and Meghan, don't switch off. So, at the moment, if you don't have Netflix, let me explain it. A lot of Netflix and other channels, there is a Disney one. You log in, right? You put your login in. Some people, I don't think any of us would do this, they share these passwords and therefore they're using a system that they're not paying for. How terribly unethical. And apparently now this is illegal. It always was.
I think it always was illegal.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been legal. It's just not enforceable.
I think the courts have said it's illegal, but it is down to the companies themselves to take the cases to court. And I think the interesting bit of this story, actually, which is not being covered, is we've said that Meghan and Harry got 4.6 million views, and that's a lot of money for Netflix, who paid a lot of money to do it. But actually,
how many people did watch it?
Actually, only 1 million people paid to watch it. Then it's not quite so lucrative for them behind the scenes, and they're probably kicking themselves because they've not got this under control. And it's very difficult. How do you police this? Knock at the door and say, show me your password.
Yeah.
If you can't get the police to come when you're burgled, the idea that they're going to be going out for your Netflix account is pie in the sky.
It really is, isn't it? It really is. I don't know if we've got time to do... I've refused to invite my brother's lonely friend for Christmas. Do we have time to do this? Does anybody know if we've got time? OK, we haven't. No, we haven't, apparently. So, ladies, all I will do is to wish you both a very, very happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Hopes for the new year, Emma?
Lose 2 stone. Drink more water.
I love that. She didn't say peace and happiness for everyone. I love that.
Yeah, you know what these lefties are like. It's all very shallow, really. Go on, Renee.
Oh, I just want to be able to not feel that I'm running the whole time. And I know you get that.
I do too. But we all do, don't we? Everyone's doing that a bit. Right, I will be back on the 28th, actually. I'm working on the Merineum, the bit in between. I've really
female part.
enjoyed the last few weeks. Thank you so much. I'll be back on the 28th. Then I'll be back in the new year. Mark Longhurst is next. Have a wonderful Christmas. Mwah.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A north-south split with the weather at the moment, with a rather grey affair across the south, dank, misty and murky, something a little brighter across Scotland and Northern Ireland. But the cloud and the drizzly rain being created by a couple of weather fronts just slowly drifting in. We'll see perhaps a little bit of heavier rain just grazing the south coast of England for a time, but mostly light rain and drizzle. A murky old day for England and Wales. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, many places here dry with sunny spells, but a northerly wind setting in will bring a few more showers across northern Scotland. They could turn to sleet and snow overnight across Shetland. Colder air here, but in the south, although it's fairly murky, it is very mild with temperatures in double figures. That rain will clear away from the south coast, but the mist and murk is likely to linger. We'll have a few more showers going into southwest Scotland overnight, and as I said, the showers in Shetland turning more and more wintry. And then later in the nights, we'll see more rain coming into the southwest. That could be quite heavy. And it stays very mild here too, whereas the colder conditions further north means there will be a frost across northern Scotland and, as I said, some snow showers in Shetland. It's rain, though, that's likely to make for some pretty grim travelling conditions across a good chunk of England and Wales on Friday morning. This rain will steadily spread northwards by the afternoon into Northern Ireland and parts of northern England. Most of the day, Scotland will be dry, and some brighter skies here, and it will brighten up further south as well as the day goes on. Another very mild one here, but also increasingly windy, and again the cold air lingering in Scotland. As the rain hits the colder air, there'll be a bit of hill snow for a time on Friday evening and into Christmas Eve, and some showers will follow in behind. But the milder air is winning out and pushing northwards, bringing a mild start to the Christmas weekend. During Christmas Day into Boxing Day, it will turn colder as we go through the Christmas weekend. Goodbye.
Join me, Calvin Robinson, on Christmas Eve and Day to explore how this special period has become a source of hope with an especially festive show. Expect Christmas carols, nativity readings, and interviews with special guests. And it's all filmed in a church for that proper Christmas feeling. Christmas, a message of hope at 2 p.m.